After the French Revolution broke out and after the period of terror, which disappointed all the intellectuals in Europe who had hoped in a better life for Europe, starting from France, a second generation of Romantic poets started to work and to produce literature. Shelley, Byron, Keats, and these are all poets, while Mary Godwin, Percy B Shelley's wife, became a famous novelist for writing Frankenstein. Percy B Shelley was born in Sussex in 1792, and he studied at Oxford. Soon he became disappointed with the education he got in college, and started feeling some sort of hate towards any form of tyranny, authority. He became an anarchist and an atheist. He wrote a pamphlet, The Necessity of Atheism, for which he was expelled from his college in Oxford. Then he started he started visiting regularly William Godwin's house. William Godwin was a famous anarchist. He was a philosopher of that time who spread his ideas of anarchy, of freedom, of equality, something very similar to what was happening in France and to what would happen 50 years later in 1848. When the Communist Manifesto was published by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. Shelley fell in love with William Godwin's daughter, Mary Godwin, although he was already married to a woman. He decided to break up with her, just sending her a letter in which he wrote, "You're not my wife anymore." And this woman, this lady, who had borne him some kids, decided to commit suicide because she was really disappointed by her husband's behavior. Soon the couple, that is Percy and Mary Shelley, eloped away from England with their common friend, Lord Byron, George Gordon Byron. They went to live in Switzerland, which was a very important period of their life. Lord Byron, his doctor, John William Polidori, Percy B Shelley, and Mary Godwin, who would later become his wife, spent some time in Villa Diodati, which is a special place near Lake Geneva in Switzerland. They spent some time there, and they decided to devote themselves to story writing. Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein, or the modern Prometheus, while Lord Byron's doctor, Polidori, wrote The Vampire, which was a Gothic story inspired by Lord Byron himself, who had the fame of being the example of homme fatale. We should not forget that the homme fatale was created much earlier than the femme fatale. Lord Byron had this reputation of being a lover, a seductive person who would fascinate anybody who might meet him. Later, this story, written by Dr. Polidori, was taken exactly 1 century later by Bram Stoker, who was an Irish writer and who wrote Dracula, Count Vlad, which is the famous ghost and Gothic story. While they were in Switzerland, Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein with the subtitle The Modern Prometheus, and we can easily recognize her fears of giving birth to a child. Mary's mother actually died 12 days after she was born, so it's easy to understand the fear that Mary felt at the idea of getting pregnant and giving birth to a child. That's why she thought of this unnatural creation of a human being by a scientist, that is Dr. Frankenstein, who created his creature, his monster. Mary Shelley was fascinated by the scientific discoveries of that time about electricity and magnetism. We should not forget that these are the years when some experiments showed that using electricity, even a dead body might move again. The company, that is Byron, his doctor, Percy and Mary Shelley, decided to move to Italy, but actually Lord Byron wanted to travel to Greece because he wanted to fight for the Greek independence. He never reached the battlefield as he died because of a violent fever in Albania. Percy B Shelley and Mary stayed in Italy, where Mary lost her 2 kids, which caused her to feel even more miserable, and that's where and when she started to write even more than before. Shelley wrote some important pieces of art, all dedicated to freedom and equality. First of all, he wrote The Cenci, which is a play set in the Vatican state, where the protagonist is a girl abused by her father. This girl can be compared to Vittorio Alfieri's heroine, in that she was abused by her father. She had someone to kill her father, but finally she was not forgiven by the Pope. This is a way of accusing the authority of being blind to the real motivations of human beings. This girl had someone to murder her father, but not for no reason. She had an important, a serious reason for wanting her father to die. But the Pope, the authority, could not understand her feelings. Then Percy B. Shelley wrote a famous ode, the Ode to the West Wind. This ode is addressed to the wind, this invisible force, and in the first 3 stanzas, Shelley addresses directly to the west wind. He defines the wind as destroyer and preserver. The wind is destroyer because the wind of change, the wind of new ideas, just like the wind itself, when winter comes, destroys all which was established before. The wind of change destroys the old ideals, the old society, to build up a new one. So in this way, the wind preserves new life, because even winter is followed by a new birth, by the rebirth of nature. Spring indicates a new birth, and the west wind, just like the winter wind, destroys the Ancien Régime, just like the French Revolution, the American Revolution had done. That's why the wind is western, because France, the United States are western states. So it had to be a west wind. The wind is an invisible force which moves and which can lift waves, clouds, dead leaves. In the first stanzas, the poet is fascinated by this invisible force, which we can only see for its effects. The wind lifts dead leaves, clouds, and waves. And the poet asks the wind to be able to share his power. He wants to be a part of that invisible force. He wants to be like a boy who runs after a kite in a way that the boy feels as free as the wind. And in fact, the poet himself is introduced as the speaking voice, I, in the last two stanzas. After the first three stanzas address the wind, saying, thou, thou, wild west wind, in the two last stanzas, an I is introduced. That I is the speaking voice of the poet. He asks the wind to make him his lyre. A lyre was an ancient musical instrument played by the blowing of the wind. So the poet asks the wind to share its power and to be able to spread the new ideals of freedom, equality, liberty. But after this moment, when the poet says, lift me like a cloud, like a dead leaf, like a wave, she says, but now I fall upon the thorns of life. I bleed. Falling down is really a miserable experience. The poet has experienced how sweet it is to feel free, but then he experiences the hardship, how hard it is to fall down the ground. He bleeds. He knows that he cannot share the same freedom that the wind possesses. But although this second last stanza might sound a little bit depressing, the last stanza contains hope for the future. Shelley writes, "O wild west wind, if winter comes, can spring be far behind? The wind is the trumpet of a prophecy, the prophecy of a better life, of a better world. The west wind has the power to share the principles of freedom, of equality, the principles that had animated the two big revolutions in the Western world, that is, the French and the American Revolution."